Hi, I'm David Mears. I am the Executive Director of Audubon Vermont. Welcome to today's Tough Conversations. I am the Executive Director of Audubon Vermont, which is part of the National Audubon Society. Our mission is to protect birds in the places birds need to thrive. And I'm delighted to turn this over in just a moment to two policy interns who are working with Audubon Vermont this semester. The task I gave them was to present a topic and a group of panelists who would challenge us, who would ask questions that are perhaps uncomfortable and difficult, and reflect some of the ways in which the environmental movement writ large needs to evolve and adjust to new learnings and new ways of understanding our relationships with each other and with the environment. So with that, I'll introduce Yilan Zhou and Thomas Patty, our two interns, and ask Yilan if you would go ahead and get us started. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the introduction, David. Hi, everyone. My name is Yilan Zhou. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a policy intern at Audubon Vermont. We wanted to start off this webinar by thanking everyone who took the time to tune in. We are really lucky to be joined by some amazing panelists that we'll introduce in just a second, but we wanted to first take some time to give a short introduction to our topic today, which is unequal access to nature and the challenges that minority or vulnerable communities face when trying to feel a sense of belonging in nature. This webinar is about fostering an inclusive environment to tackle the existing stereotype of an outdoorsy person as being white, straight, cisgender, or just in general part of a more dominant identity. Just to set the stage, here's a quick overview of recent research on the subject out of the University of Vermont's Gunn Institute for the Environment. And all this information can be found on the slideshow that's posted in the chat, so feel free to reference it at any point during the webinar. Especially since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic, Americans have increasingly turned to nature for its large variety of benefits, including release from stress, anxiety, and depression. However, in urban centers where non-white and low-income communities are concentrated, access to green spaces is declining, thus compounding COVID's already disproportionate effect on these groups. Furthermore, rapid development of natural areas for residential and commercial use is predicted to decimate low-income and people of color, and their access to both the mental and physical benefits of nature. Such negative consequences for minority communities have the opposite effect for white and wealthier communities who are able to enjoy an even greater access to nature and its benefits. All of which furthers the divide of access to nature and constructs more obstacles for minority communities who may already feel a limited sense of belonging or welcomeness in nature. And with this, I'll turn it over to Thomas for the introduction of our panelists.
Thanks, Yilan, for that important context to our conversation. My name is Thomas Patty. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm the other policy intern at Audubon Vermont. And without further ado, let's introduce our panelists. So if you could please share with us your name and pronouns and tell us a little bit about your relationship with nature. Any good stories, early memories, favorite activities. It's totally up to you. Let's start with Jamie.
A lot of places aren't accessible. Slowly over the years, it has been getting better, but we still have a long ways to go. But when I when I found kayaking, that just changed everything. Unfortunately, a lot of places, a lot of waterways aren't accessible yet, but we are working on that.
Great, thank you very much, Jamie. Let's move on to Alex.
My name is Alex Hilliard. I use they, them pronouns, and I am from Poultney, and I am entering this space as a personal trainer and trail runner. And I think my most vivid memories of being in nature were probably, although I grew up in southeastern Massachusetts in a city, my grandmother lived in Franconia Notch in New Hampshire. And I remember picking wild blueberries and using those to make pancakes. I had to pick at least a quarter of a cup of blueberries, which if you picked wild blueberries, that's a lot of blueberries. and doing things like checking out the flume or the basin or some of the other features in Franconia Notch.
Great, thanks so much, Alex. Let's move on to Abby.
Hi everyone, my name is Abby Chrysostomo, she, her pronouns. I'm one of the co-founders of Unlikely Riders. As far as my relationship to nature, I'm a snowboarder and also a hiker. And then in 2015, I sort of combined both of those and started getting into backcountry snowboarding. So that's quickly became my favorite thing to do. So doing that in queer and trans company is definitely one of my favorite things to do outside in nature.
Great, thanks so much. And then let's move on to Elise, please.
Hi, everyone. My name's Elise. I use she, her pronouns. I am a student at Middlebury College, and I'm the president of our student organization called FIRE, which stands for Fostering Inclusive Recreation Experiences. And we run outdoor trips that are led by and for students of color. I'm from Seattle. Well, I guess I grew up in Florida, and then when I was in elementary school, I moved to Seattle, and I think that was really when I realized how much I loved to play outside because the mountains and the ocean were right there. And with my parents being from New York City, they were not into that. So that was something really special I found as I grew up, and I love sharing that with people here in Vermont.
Great, thanks so much. And last but not least, Justin.
Hey everyone, Justin Marsh, they, them pronouns. I'm former development and communications director at Pride Center Vermont and had the pleasure of collaborating on many Pride hikes with Audubon Vermont. And I'm now the political outreach director at Vermont Conservation Voters and the chair of the Cambridge Conservation Commission. And Jamie, fun fact, Jamie and I both went to, we're from the same town and went to the same high school a few years apart, but she can probably relate to this, being people of a certain age. And when we were growing up, there was not a lot of things to do in Loyola County. There's probably still not a lot to do. So one of the fun things that a few friends of mine decided to do was climb Mount Mansfield, which is basically in our backyard. But I wasn't prepared. And so I didn't have any water with me. I had flip-flops on and it was really hot, but we did it and it was memorable, blisters and all. And so I get to say that I, climbed Mount Mansfield in flip-flops, and yeah, so that's me.
Thanks. Makes for a good story now.
Yeah, exactly.
I feel like that's both really cool and also kind of scary at the same time, but
definitely not logical for sure.
That's fair. You made it, so that's all that matters. Thank you guys so much for the introductions. Now we'd like to hear maybe a little more about your respective engagements. So if you're involved with an organization that confronts this issue, what's its overall mission? Or in other words, what do you do personally or professionally to resist or rectify unequal access to wildlife or natural spaces? Do you want to go the opposite way? And Justin, you start first, maybe?
Happy to, yeah. So I'm coming to this conversation mostly with my Conservation Commission hat on. And I ran for the Vermont legislature in 2012 as a 23-year-old. And I was told by someone who was an older gentleman that I wasn't doing enough for the community and that I needed to be like a public servant. So I took that challenge and I joined every single board and commission I possibly could. I think at one point I was on like 7 local organizations, and the only one that I still am on, because burnout is real, y'all, is the Cambridge Conservation Commission, which I've been the chair of probably for about 7 years now. And we just completed the acquisition of municipal land, 51 acres of conserved land with the Vermont Land Trust and the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board. And it's something that started in 2017. Peter Crush came to me and said that he had land that was already in conservation with the land trust and that he wanted to add more to it. And then with the hopes that it would become municipal property that everyone could enjoy. Unfortunately, he passed away about a year after, but we had already started getting the wheels in motion. And luckily, his wife, Sally Laughlin, who is the co-founder of VINS and also just an amazing human being, was able to carry that torch on. And we got the municipality to go through with everything, and we were able to acquire the land. And I can speak more to that later about the challenges that go with like having a local organization, a volunteer organization, do the work for the community. And yeah, that's the number one thing that I'm really proud of and passionate about talking about. And I can also go into more about the accessibility challenges of having the public trails and maintenance and everything like that goes into it. But I don't want to take up too much time.
That's fair. We can definitely circle back to that.
Awesome.
Maybe Alex, you can go next.
Sure. And for part of this answer, I have to read something because I'm partnering with an organization whose mission, although I love them very much, I have not memorized down to the T. I am, as I mentioned, a personal trainer, and my personal training studio is called VT Athletifit. And VT Athletifit and Come Alive Outside, which we are both Rutland County organizations. We are partnering to be able to offer free access to personal training and geared to folks who are likely to experience inequity in health access. And the populations are the folks that you would generally think of when thinking about marginalized folks, and includes BIPOC, low income, LGBTQ, older Vermonters, folks with physical and mental health challenges, people who are or were formerly incarcerated, people with disabilities, and then like refugees, migrant workers, not other non-citizens, etc. And so a little bit more about Come Alive Outside. They are a nonprofit that connects folks to the outdoors for health, wellness, and joy. And everything they do is through collaboration. And through their Outdoors for All initiative, they are shifting their way of work to prioritize programs, champion influencers, and partner with organizations that make the outdoors more inclusive, safe, and equitable spaces. They're also doing weekly on-site free outdoor related programs where they partner with priority populations and bring the gear that the priority populations say that they're going to need in order to decrease barriers and enjoy the outdoors. And as I mentioned, I am a personal trainer, so that's how I am trying to rectify access, is to make those folks that are able to enjoy the personal training, the free personal training, so they can feel empowered to want to go into spaces. And I'll talk more about this later with another question, I'm sure, but as a trail runner, as a BIPOC trail runner, I can say that I'm very used to being the only BIPOC person in many spaces. So that's kind of how I'm trying to influence the situation, is to try to call in more folks like myself to feel comfortable.
Yeah, thank you so much. That sounds really interesting, by the way. Abby, I know I'm not going in order. I'm just sort of looking at people on my screen right now.
Totally, I'm happy to go. So I'm here representing Unlikely Riders, and really what we do is we're mobilizing our community to find healing with mountains and claim space in the snow sports industry and culture. We really do that through a number of different programs that we run, but the real essence of it is that we run these programs to reduce or eliminate the barriers to snow sports for BIPOC Vermonters, and also really create a community for folks to really exist fully and authentically on snow. Our main program is our winter gear closet, and since our founding in 2020, we distributed just over 1,300 pieces of winter gear to folks. We also do lessons and guided uphill and backcountry instruction, and we've done over 140, instructed over 140 folks in those areas. And then we also do community days and different mountain days at different mountains throughout Vermont. Last year, we had our season ending party at Jay Peak. A bunch of folks there to ski for free, to get lessons, to get gear from the gear closet, to have beautiful, nourishing food from a great local vendor there. And over 250 people have attended those type of events. So Yeah, collectively, our community, I think we spent over 480 days on snow together at no cost to them. So that's really what we're all about and how we're reducing the barriers for BIPOC folks in Vermont on snow.
Cool. I was actually going to ask you whether the lessons and programs are free just for personal reasons, but it seems like
Yes.
they are, so perfect. So Elise, maybe?
Yeah, so I mentioned before, I'm the president of FIRE, which again stands for Fostering Inclusive Recreation Experiences. This is a group at Middlebury College that was started about a year ago by my dear friend Cameron. It was something that we had both talked about, as we felt like we lacked this space on campus where there's a lot of, I guess, encouragement, but also pressure to recreate outside, but didn't feel like there was a space for folks who didn't have that much experience doing that to try things for the first time. So FIRE is trying to be just an inclusive and just fun space to try new things outside and appreciate, the amazing natural spaces that surround us in Vermont. So over the past year, I've led a lot of trips anywhere. We've got like sort of more traditional outdoor recreation activities like hiking. We go kayaking on Lake Dunmore. We've done cross-country skiing, but also it's been a fun opportunity to just try different things and like partner with different groups. So like we did a tour of the fish hatchery with Vermont Fish and Wildlife, and we'll just like go outside and learn how to set up a tent or do like a backcountry cooking lesson. Like, so there's kind of something for everyone, which has been really fun. And being a part of a college gives us sort of access to all these shared resources. So all of our trips are free. We have access to like the campus climbing wall, or there's a really awesome gear room on campus that like all of our participants on trips can just like get free gear from. So even though we have so much access to gear and like transportation, and so FIRE's, I think, role in bringing folks outside is having the guided trips and guides who are folks of color to sort of create an inclusive space.
I just wanted to say, as a member of the BIPOC community at Middlebury, we wanted to thank you for starting this. Since a lot like me and a lot of my friends didn't have a lot of experience outdoors before coming here. So it's been really great to be part of this great community. And Jamie, do you want to
go? So the organization that I'm part of is the Northeast Disabled Athletic Association, and they have a kayaking program that was started about 7 years ago with a Kathy Webster, who is a physical therapist. She asked me things that I'd like to do, and kayaking came up. So she brought her kayak right into the pool and figured out what I would need in order to go out and kayak. So she it has grown just from me to, I don't know how many we have now. It's huge every summer. But every disability is different. So she does like an assessment and figures out what everybody would need in order to kayak safely. So the next part of doing the kayaking is the accessibility of the Vermont parks, which a lot of times is lacking, but it is slowly coming around. Every waterway has people who are in charge of accessibilities, and a lot of times they don't realize that their places need to be worked on. So she contacts them and tries to make it so they're more accessible, and we're slowly adding more and more waterways to our repertoire.
I saw on your website there you guys have a lot of like adaptive equipment. How did you guys, sorry, this is just an unrelated question, but how did you guys get funding for that? Is that just
Well, the Northeast Disabled Athletic Association, they get funding just through people. There are some grants that you have to write for, but a lot of it is just people donating money.
cool. Thank you so much.
Thanks everyone for your really thoughtful answers there. And before we get into the challenges and potential solutions to, inequity in nature, we wanted to sort of ground this issue in lived experience. So to the panelists, I sort of asked the question, how has unequal access to nature affected you or people you know personally? And do you have any sort of stories that illustrate the reality of this issue on the ground? I don't want to necessarily call anyone out for this. So do we have any volunteers to start off?
I can,
Sure.
but so kayaking and waterways isn't the only places that have trouble with accessibility. For instance, we had a family reunion before COVID, and we wanted to go to the Smuggler's Notch boardwalk that we had seen advertised, and they advertised it specifically because it was now wheelchair accessible. So we got my family all psyched up to go and got there, and the boardwalk was beautiful. So we started going, and about 5 minutes down the walkway, it stopped. And there was a big step, and the trail continued, but it was a unaccessible trail. So we had a lot of family and a lot of little kids. So I put on my it's no big deal smiley face and just told them, you guys continue on, and we'll me and a couple of family members just kind of went back and forth on the boardwalk. But it was pretty disappointing because it was so ridiculously short. And so I think disappointment is what a lot of people end up feeling when there's equality, unequality.
Right. Well, I'm sorry to hear that, and I think to me it sounds like it speaks to the importance of really intentional planning, especially when you're going to sort of advertise to the community that the place is accessible. You really should be consulting people who you're speaking about, which they may or may not have done, but in this case, it sounds like however they did it, it didn't work out. Would anyone else like to add on to that or share their own experiences?
I'll add something if it's okay. I would like to add an answer to the question, but just as to someone asked in the chat about the partners for the health equity grant, they are Come Alive Outside in Rutland County and VT Athletic Fit, which is also in Rutland County. So I think that the place where it's just felt the most unequal for me personally, and I guess my story sort of, or my experience feels like it really pales in comparison next to Jamie's, because I just feel weird most of the time as one of the only Black or brown people in a space. But I mean, I think that comparison is the thief of joy. What matters is that, you know, in lots of different ways, we all feel awkward, you know, whether it's or uncomfortable or, you know, upset by the inequity that we're experiencing, whether it's, I'm running in my town of Poultney, and Poultney is a very white town. Like, I don't know any other runners that are in Poultney that are people of color. I also have been engaging in something called VT251. It's a Facebook group. There's like the VT251 of just visiting towns in general, but this one's VT251, the race less traveled. And everyone's agenda is to go and run in every town and city in Vermont. So I think I just got like 28 after like a year and a half of trying to do it. So at this rate, it's going to take me at least a decade probably to get to all these places. But my point is that like and so I ran 18 races in 2021 and 23 races in 2022. They weren't all in Vermont. There were a couple. I did like one in Maine and a couple in New York. I would say probably about a third of them were in New Hampshire, and then a very small handful were in Mass. But you know, if you look at my map of the towns that I've run in across Vermont, like I've hit a couple in the Northeast Kingdom. I'm sure it's not surprising that the only time that I ever see people, I think I was in like Huntington, maybe. It was near Burlington. It's like, oh, there's like 5 Black people here. Oh my God, like this is crazy. That was like such a huge number of BIPOC people for me to see in one space. Like, I shouldn't be that excited about seeing 5 people, but it was just like, maybe I see one on like in a big race on a good day. So that was pretty nuts. But yeah, like I've definitely noticed, like trying to run across different towns all throughout the state, that it's not just, I don't think it's because Black people don't like trail running. I think it's because, you know, whether it's issues of like, you don't know what kind of shoes you need to wear, or like what kind of exercises you need to do to go out and run on a trail and not roll your ankle, or what places are safe. Are you going to get eaten by bears? Is someone going to grab you and rape you? Like, there are all these things that, like, if you're not basically born here and don't get this like generational wisdom that Vermonters love to pass down through many generations, you just kind of like, the first time that I ever tried to do a run by myself, I got very, very lost. And I had been on that trail many times before. So, you know, I think that there's just probably various situations for each of us that are kind of like that, where we feel like we don't belong all throughout the state of Vermont, no matter which corner you go to.
Kind of going back to your point about being excited about seeing other people of color on the trails, I felt that so many times. I grew up in Pennsylvania, and every time I see like a person of color on the trails, there's sort of like a mutual connection that happens right away, because it's just like 2 people in a very different environment and just trying to make it work. So thank you for sharing that.
Would anyone else like to?
Yeah, I have just a little thing to add. I think one of the challenges that I faced in a lot of my community organizing roles and capacities was the fact that I was younger and very openly queer, and I think that it was hard to be taken seriously with a lot of these initiatives. And I've learned strategies on how to achieve those types of things by aligning myself with people who are older and people who are, you know, have done all these things, that they can be taken seriously. I think it's frustrating to look back on, you know, the last 10 years or so, and the initiatives that I've put forth, and how many barriers that I've faced in getting them done, you know, especially with like the preserve, because I wasn't necessarily taken seriously, and I had the ambition because I was younger. You know, it's like, and I'm not even that old right now, but to think of what I could have accomplished when I had the energy and the ambition and the passion. And when you hit those roadblocks so many times, you start to kind of fizzle your focus a little bit, and you're like, well, why am I doing all of this? So that can be a frustrating thing to encounter. And I'm sure my co-panelists can relate to the ageism that occurs when you're trying to do anything, and especially in an older state like Vermont.
Do you still feel that sort of discrimination against being young? Because you are young, you know.
In the grand scheme of things, yeah. I mean, I think enough. I've got enough under my belt at this point where I can say, you know, I've done X, Y, and Z, but and I've stayed true. But I do often wonder, like, why did I stick around, and why do I still continue to, you know, find? And I mean, if there's, I can answer all those questions, but there's still those reflective moments where I'm like, why did I do, you know, why am I just continuously hitting a wall? But yeah, and I think too, you know, being, you know, the only queer person or the only, you know, whatever in a room, and that's relatable as well, that it's hard. To see yourself reflected is really important. And when you don't have that, it certainly can be more difficult. But then I always think that, you know, maybe I'm that person for someone else, you know, coming down the line. So, you know, silver linings.
Paving the way for everyone.
Great, thank you. Justin, I'm remembering your comment about being burned out because of all of your involvement with all of these organizations in the past. And it reminds me of sort of a comment that Elise made before our webinar about sort of the threat of representing underserved communities in those types of roles, and then being burned out as a result of sort of that burden of being represented. I'm curious, Elise, if you had anything else if you could sort of expand on that point. That was sort of something that I was just interested in learning more about coming into this.
Sure, yeah, I can talk about that and sort of share a personal story. A challenge for FIRE specifically has been, also for context, the only two folks who could guide trips for FIRE are me and Cameron, who started FIRE. And Cameron's abroad, so I've actually been the only one leading trips for the past year. And it's the kind of thing where it's like, people really want, you know, to go on trips, and you don't have a huge window while we're here at school that has good weather to run trips that won't be, you know, dangerous for folks who may not feel super comfortable outside in the first place. So I felt, yeah, a lot of pressure to like run trips, and but I go back and forth because it's also like, I would love it if I could, you know, have other folks lead trips, but in our context, like those folks would be not people of color. And I struggle between the wanting these trips, or like creating a space that's very intentional and where folks of color are in leadership roles and are being a great sort of role models for others to be like, oh, hey, I can do that too. But then also want to share this burden of like, you know, like there's already fewer of us, like sharing the burden and being like, hey, you know, folks who grew up being in the outdoors and having access to gear, like, can you take some of that or like lead trips? So that's sort of been an ongoing sort of tension when it comes to FIRE. And like, I really, like in my personal experience as someone who just loves the outdoors and spends a lot of time in these like, you know, natural spaces, it's rarely that the discomfort I feel comes from other people intentionally being like biased. I have had a couple experiences in rural Idaho where people were like, you were not from here, like you do not look like us, please leave, which is one thing. I think often it comes from people like they're just living their truth of like, yeah, I grew up backcountry skiing my whole life, and not really realizing how that affects others. So like specifically, well, I'm studying geology And I was really excited. A couple of years ago, I got an internship with the Northwest Avalanche Center, which does avalanche forecasting for the state of Washington. And I was so excited, and there's going to be some other youth interns because I was interested in water resources and just snow science. I thought it was so cool. And I show up, and everyone's sort of sharing, their intros and their background, why they're there. And I'm like, oh, I love science, and I'm a search and rescue responder. Like, I want to keep people safe. And everyone else is like, I've been skiing since before I was born. Like, when I was like, my mom was pregnant with me, she would like go backcountry skiing. My parents were winter warriors, like all these things, which is awesome and so cool that they grew up with that. But I left that meeting crying because I was like, avalanche and snow science is for backcountry skiers. Like, this is a whole sort of realm of science that was created to support people who like to do dangerous things in their free time, was what I came away from that with. And I wish that wasn't the case, but it's just an example of like, I don't think it's often intentional, when people who have privilege in this area are like causing discomfort. Like it's sort of it's more complicated than that.
Thank you.
I was wondering whether, Abby, you had something to say about Elise's dilemma with fire, about how there's not maybe enough POC who feel comfortable leading trips, but there's a lot of very qualified other people who have dominant identities who would love to do it. Because I know you guys do sort of similar things. So would you like to weigh in?
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to. That's a really tough dilemma. I think one of the things that we're really tapping into at Unlikely Riders is our volunteer community. And part of that is through our educational offerings and training our trip leaders on. This weekend, we're sending 9 people to a wilderness first aid class. We're certifying 8 people to be, I always get this acronym wrong, PSIA level 1 ski instructors. And then in January, we're doing the AASI snowboard instructor. So 8 other people who will then be able to use these skills to, not only, lead and instruct people for Unlikely Riders, but also just to take their friends to the ski area and teach them. I mean, I feel so much of ski instruction is just going skiing with your friends and getting tips here and there. So, we're really giving these folks the skills to, go forth and teach other people how to ski. And really, it's so expensive to get a lesson on a mountain. It's maybe like $40, $50 at the minimum. So the more knowledge that we can give our community, the more power we have in these realms. And that makes it so much better to have folks able and qualified to lead trips. We're also sending 6 people to an avalanche course too. So it's really great. And I'm excited to see where this will take our organization and how we're able to lead trips and the offerings that we're able to have for our community.
Yeah, Alex.
I also wanted to say something in response to that question, and this is directed towards Elise. And so I went to Green Mountain College, which had a Green Map program, it's Green Mountain Adventure Programming, and we had like a billion trips all the time. Let me tell you, I never went on any of those trips because it was all white people doing white people things, like climbing, like ice climbing. I'm like, why would you do that? That seems crazy. And now these days, like, I signed up for like a crampon course last year and was like, I'm going to try this. Although they ended up getting canceled because there like wasn't enough snow or ice. And now I would try it. But I just wanted to mention that, like, just the importance of having BIPOC representation. I totally get that it's hard to be the only person bearing the torch. And like, that's kind of, I feel like, how many of us feel in many different roles in Vermont, where it's like, there's just not enough people for all the things. But I think it really makes a big difference. Like, now I'm 33, and back then I was, between the ages of like 18 and 19, like 22 or something. And I wish that I had gotten into all of these things. I only just started getting into outdoor recreation the last year because it made sense for personal training to start running. And running is like, I don't want to say it's low barrier in ability, because it's not, but it's low barrier in regards to the cost for the items that you need compared to like I've always wanted to ski or snowboard, but I've never been able to afford the gear or to afford the pass or any of the other things. And so that's how I started with running. And I didn't really realize how much I like outdoor recreation. I knew I liked sports, but I didn't know I liked outdoor recreation. So I just would encourage you, even as you're tired, to remember like that, like, you know, I probably would have gotten roped in a decade ago, and it could be a decade more, which I'm not saying in like a regretful way, but I think that, you know, you're all the folks that you're working with at school, you're having an impact on them and you're turning them into lifelong outdoor rec lovers. So thank you for your service.
I second that. Sorry. Did everyone go for the question? I think so. Cool. Is there anything you wanted to add to each other's statements? Feel free to just like popcorn it. You don't have to go through us or raise your hand. Just speak your truth. No? Okay. For the other question, we were just wondering what you guys think are some central barriers to achieving equitable access to nature, and if any of those barriers are unique to Vermont specifically. Does anyone feel strongly about that?
Yeah, I'm happy to chime in. And I think this has already been touched on a lot from Elise and some of the other panelists too. I mean, I'm here with a view for snow sports. So as it really relates to snow sports, as part of our intake for our membership form, we sort of ask folks, hey, what barriers are you facing? So one of the main ones that we've really identified for snow sports is really the prohibitive cost of gear, lift tickets, lessons, the gas that it takes to get to a mountain. I mean, it's $4 a gallon right now. Not having a car. I think for the mountains, and especially where we are, not having a car is a huge issue. That's definitely very much a Vermont issue when it comes to not being able to get to the mountain and to get to all these other places.
What about some like mental issues, some mental barriers to access? Not to throw out control or anything.
Oh,
good.
One thing I certainly haven't writer folks to WFA thing, which is awareness first aid. Like really, like getting down to basics. Safety first aid is a huge one, not for just folks of color or folks with disabilities. Everyone getting outside, because it can be so unknown, can end with weather and unpredictability. And I think that's really like, institutional knowledge is the right, like wisdom passed through family or community who is really like established in, you know, an outdoor space. I think, like community or having that ready really like be someone who like, yeah, like, you know, not having your friends, you know, hiking, like that's something that really like personally only learned because I did, you know, I became a responder just like volunteering in high school and did like a year of like and first aid and navigation training, and then after that I was like, okay, cool, I can myself. So one way to combat that is like, I think like we did like strength paying for their first aid training because yeah, either.
I just want to say, at least maybe you cut out at certain points in that, so I don't know if we got like all of that, but I got the main gist, so thank you.
Some of the barriers with people with disabilities, as far as like kayaking and going on trails, obviously is the terrain. I mean, there's some places that people in wheelchairs just aren't gonna be able to get to. But the barrier that I think we need to work on more would be that the places that could be accessible, just with talking with the people who can make a difference. And the big barrier would be funding. Some of them are not that much money, just like simply putting an accessible porta potty where they're not able to get to the regular bathrooms, or putting a ramp, and the funding it would take to maintain the ramp. Those are some of the barriers.
This seems like a good, sorry, was this Alex?
Yeah, I contribute a very unpopular opinion, probably. I think that the greatest barrier to access is white people not acknowledging racism, and also like when not even microaggressions, but when like subtle racism is kind of explained away because it's like, well, you know, it's not somebody's fault because they have privilege, but folks need to acknowledge that they have privilege. That's the only way that the rest of us are going to get any access to the rest of that pie, is when some folks can be like, oh shoot, like I already have this whole pie already that I've just been enjoying and you don't get to have any. And I feel like it's just, you know, doing things like naming that, like it's a privilege that some folks like know how to ski, that their families brought them up for holidays or, you know, during the winter, because like, you know, for folks that didn't grow up in that setting, that was never an option. Like I've never, whether it was financial or distance, or, you know, there are various other factors. And so I think that this is kind of like one of the mental barriers. And it's like, yeah, just like feeling like, you know, we need to ensure that those folks that, and I mean, I'm not really, although part of the pushback is definitely in to what Elise said, and I'm not trying to make you feel attacked, Elise. I swear I had this written down in my notebook even before we came here. But it's like thinking about like the folks that, just the cishet white people that are dominating in these spots, and like helping them understand what kind of privilege they have. And only because if they never know the ways in which they are benefiting from privilege, if they only just know, they're just like, oh, I'm just skiing because I like skiing, instead of being like, wow, I'm really lucky that I get to do this. If they're not aware of that privilege, then they can't do anything to try to redistribute. So, I mean, that would be, I think, my biggest barrier for access, is just the unwillingness, either unwillingness to accept or people not wanting to make other people feel uncomfortable, because I think everybody has to feel uncomfortable if we want to make things change.
That actually leads perfectly into our next question, because for future steps, like how do we have people acknowledge their privilege, or what are some things that we can do in order to counter these feelings? So Thomas, do you want to?
Sorry, the question about words of wisdom.
Yeah, words of wisdom, or like next steps that we can do.
Right. So, I mean, I guess there's sort of two separate tracks to that. And one is sort of asking for, you know, advice from the panelists here about sort of, you know, speaking to that person who doesn't feel comfortable. The word uncomfortable has come up several times so far. And what would you say to that person? Is there something that that's within their power to sort of begin to access these spaces that they've been excluded from? Let's start with that one. Does anyone have any sort of any thoughts about that?
Clarifying question. Folks who like feel welcome. Is this for like folks who are like, hey?
Could you repeat that? I'm sorry.
I was just to clarify, by them who may feel uncomfortable.
Could you try taking out your AirPods? Sometimes they make people cut out when they're talking on like video calls and stuff. I've noticed. I don't know if that will help.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Oh, perfect. Yeah.
Oh, amazing. Okay. Just to, yeah, because you cut out, so maybe that was just me. This is like advice or wisdom for folks who feel unwelcome, or is this things we want to say to people like who have privilege already in the outdoors?
For people who feel unwelcome.
Okay, cool.
Want to answer first then, since
Sure. I mean, it is a little tricky because I think there's so much to be like done from folks who aren't like in that tricky position, but there are so many people and organizations out there who are working so hard to like make the outdoors a more inclusive space and who want to help. I think like growing up, I didn't really do the work to seek out those people. And I felt like pretty alone and was like, I'm just doing this by myself. But over the past couple of years, like I've seen, even on social media, just following organizations or people who are just doing really cool things. And I feel like that solidarity has been pretty empowering, even though it's maybe not as tangible as, the most tangible advice, but yeah, just seeing people who look like me at trailheads or just like in online spaces has just like helped me personally gain more confidence when I've felt uncomfortable by the people in these outdoor spaces.
So just get involved more with organizations, or
not even like get involved if you have the time and the motivation, but also just like seeing like, hey, there's a cool women's cycling group down in Connecticut that like did a ride this week. Just like seeing stuff like that and being like, oh, there's other people out here who care about this and are people of color or people in general like doing cool things outside. It's just cool to see.
Yeah, I echo the affinity spaces are really important, and it's one of the reasons why I love Pride Hikes, and we'll continue to be a co-host as long as Gwen and Audubon Vermont will have me. But I think that there's something, we've had Pride Hikes happen twice on the Peter Crush Nature Preserve, and there's like this magical moment where you're like, wow, the parking lot was full and you had so many people participating, and those were all people with shared identities. And I think that can just be it's a really nice moment to like reflect on that and know that, that has happened and that those people feel included and welcome there. And I also want to say that Audubon and Pride Hikes partners do a really good job of trying to find places that it's a once a month event, but they try to find places that are more accessible one month and do a more challenging one the next, one place closer to Burlington, one that's outside of Chittenden County the next. And I think that's also really important, is remembering that, even though the major population center is in one part of the state, there's so many people out there who need this representation and access who are outside of those places. So, and I just also want to say, we had some disability advocates really try to push us to make our trails inclusive of people with physical disabilities. And the funding is a huge challenge. The municipality made us fundraise. We had to fundraise with the Vermont Land Trust. And I think you get into so many layers of privilege and classism and the need to do all of these things. And so when you add on these other layers of, okay, now, sure, you want a trail, but now you need to make it, accessible, and we have the desire to do so, but in order to get to the opening, what's the easiest way for us to just get this done so that we can have it and say it now exists and is now in the hands of the municipality. And so it's just one of those, it's always put down to a plan B, and I hate that. But it's one of those like really unfortunate situation. Like I don't have a great answer for it, and it is uncomfortable because it's a desire, and it's always just pushed down on the ranking, and not prioritized. And I think that's, obviously that's unjust in a lot of ways.
Do you think that's sort of like a structural reason, because like the government, the way it funds certain programs, or is there anything that we can do in order to raise money?
Yeah, I mean, I think there was additional costs with making this trail. It's a pretty short trail. It's just a little over a mile, and it is actually, the capability of making it accessible to people in wheelchairs would be easier than a lot of other trails out there. Not as easy as like the Lamoille Valley Rail Trail that is mostly flat, but because we'd have to add in extra switchbacks, it would lengthen the trail. There would be additional, grading that we would have to do, and that just upped the costs of the people working on the trail, which we did a lot of volunteer work and stuff like that. So I think if there was more funding opportunities, and there are some specifically for making trails accessible, but when you're chasing grants and you're trying to do all you can as a volunteer org, you're up against that challenge of not having the infrastructure with just pure people to like do, if we had the staffing at we're a town of 4,000 people. So if we had a big city government that had staffing that could write grants all day long and they got paid to do that, that was their paid labor, that would be one thing. But all these small towns, these 251 towns that Alex is running through, they don't have that. So
have you guys had any of the other panelists run into problems like that with your organizations? No, I mean, everyone has different obstacles, so that makes sense.
I think luckily for our organization, as far as grants go, we've been lucky enough to be able to work with the Northeast Disabled Association, and also working with people at UVM, that they've been helping a lot with grant writing also. So as far as writing grants, sometimes reaching out to people who've done it before can be helpful.
Thomas recently helped with drafted grant, which was very cool.
Yes, and it's a lot of work, so I understand that it's not something that is accessible. I mean, the process is time intensive and labor intensive, so that's definitely a problem that could definitely benefit from some streamlining. So yeah, I definitely appreciate that now. I guess sort of we want to take some time toward the end of the webinar. We have 30 minutes left to really focus on next like actionable steps toward improving equity and access. And I think we've sort of already made some great suggestions toward that end, but to sort of really square down on that, I think we'll take 15 or 20 minutes, and we also want to make sure that we answer any questions from the audience. So if any audience members have additional questions, this is a great time to put those in the chat. But before then, would any panelists like to share any ideas about sort of next steps for Vermont or beyond with that question?
I will. It's the same way that I would have answered the other question about how organizations can better support minority community access to nature. And it's twofold. I think that we need to do more to support BIPOC-owned businesses in the sector. So for instance, I just noticed she's on Sung-Hee Chung from Powered Magazine. So awesome. Even though I might feel like I'm one of the only BIPOC people around, I get stuff in the inbox from Sung-Hee that's like, okay, we're going fly fishing, or we're going for like a BIPOC bike ride, or like, it's all like affinity spaces, BIPOC affinity spaces that make me feel safe and secure, and I know they exist and that I could go and do that if I wanted to. I don't really want to drive 2 hours for it, but I know it's there if I need it. So I'd say like supporting and uplifting those kinds of businesses that do things like that, that are making this space more inclusive. And then the second one is building more affinity spaces and events to attract BIPOC people. I was at, I believe it was West Mountain last year, and there was like something on the inside, which it was in New York. I was in a bathroom in a stall and like I wish I had like taken a picture of the poster, but basically it was like it was to encourage BIPOC folks to like come back to the mountain, come back. Like we have these programs that we want to basically make you feel comfortable and make you feel like this space is for you. And it depends, but I think, it depends like what it will look like for each organization or each person as they're doing it. But I think at the core of that is just being really intentional in supporting not just BIPOC folks, but just marginalized folks in these spaces of like, yeah, what does this person need? Like, how can I support them? And just, yeah, being much more intentional than we have been in that way.
Great. I think that's a great answer also for Fiona's comment in the chat. I hope that helps, Fiona, with your question. And just to sort of summarize from what I'm hearing, it's a lot about intentionality, and that it's not enough to just say, well, of course we welcome these people on our properties or in our organizations. It has to really be a much more active and intentional effort. Thank you, Alex. Does anyone else have anything to say about that?
Yeah, I can jump in. I mean, jumping on what you said, Alex, definitely supporting the orgs that are already doing this work on the ground. We know what we need. We know what the barriers our communities are facing, and we're in the best position to address those and overcome those barriers. What we really need is funding and access. And those are both things that, due to systemic racism, BIPOC orgs receive proportionally less of to these more legacy organizations. So directing funding to these orgs is the best way to do that. And another thing I would say, this is sort of the question in the chat, is that I would add for legacy organizations who want to get into this work is to really focus first on building meaningful, not transactional relationships with systemically excluded communities, and not just there's this big desire to just bring folks in for representation. But when you do that without doing any of the internal work, any of the internal equity work, it's just tokenization. And a lot of orgs get that wrong. So I would definitely focus on, really building those meaningful relationships rather than just pressing for, representation for, photo shoots or whatever it may be.
Do you think, going off your point with like a deeper representation, do you think hearing people's stories is a good way to make that happen? So maybe like podcasts or more webinars like this, or is that less effective perhaps?
I think so, but I mean, I also think elevating, marginalized people in positions of power is the best way to build power for our communities and to really ensure that this is something that will continue in the future, and it's not just a photo op or something like that.
I can add on to that. Yeah, in addition, I mean, really like emphasizing what Abby said about like supporting the people who are already doing the work. Like people have been doing this for years and years, and I think it's come onto the radar of people. I think a lot of people didn't think about this until about 2 years ago, with a lot of social change that happened. So supporting people already in the work. I guess the thing I'll add is, especially for organizations, who are trying to sort of increase the consideration towards equity, is I think what I've seen personally is some organizations using equity as an excuse to not put in the work. And what I mean by that is that when it comes to the outdoors, people saying like, oh, to make the outdoors more accessible, let's do like, more like easier trips or things like that, which is great. But at the same time, like, I guess an example I'll use is like, you see this in geology departments, across the US right now. It's like, we're going to do less field trips to make, bring more students into geology. And that's great. But also like students want the opportunity to like go outside and try field work. Like you're not going to get that opportunity anywhere else. Or even at Middlebury College right now, like they, we had optional outdoor orientation trips for first years before COVID, and they took those away during COVID, and they don't want to bring them back. And the reason that they're giving is that they like don't think it's inclusive. And from everyone I've talked to in fire, people would love to have outdoor orientation trips because there's not that many chances you get, like even during the school year, to go on a 2-night intro backpacking trip. And instead of putting in the work to say, hey, let's, make these inclusive, like let's make the outdoors more inclusive, they're saying, we're going to take these away because, the outdoors isn't inclusive, instead of putting in the work to make it better. So, yeah, in short, intentionality. And yeah, it's going to take work. And yeah, it's not easy.
Feel you on the orientation trips. That was one of the things that I was looking forward to coming into college, and they completely just cut them out. So that was sad. There's been a lot of great questions in the chat. I think Rachel just submitted one saying, aside from the great work from Audubon Society and Pride Center, are there any other organizations in Vermont that you feel are doing that work as well? And are they doing it in an authentic way, which is interesting. What do you guys think?
I can plug Pride Rides, which is a mountain biking and bike club based, I think, out of Washington County. Chris Hunt sort of heads that up and is great at making inclusive space for queer people on bikes. And so I think they've got like some social media, and they kind of do it on their own. Sort of, they tap into other organizations here and there for signal boosting and things like that. But I would just definitely check that out. Speaking of like affinity spaces and outdoor places.
I think what really caught my attention, I agree. I've seen that organization around, by the way. It looks really interesting. But was the authentic way that they're doing it? What do you guys think? Is there a specific authentic way that groups should represent vulnerable communities, or is every form of representation authentic?
I can jump in there. I feel like it starts with having leadership that's representative of the community. I think that's where you're going to find the most authenticity. Pride Rides is an incredible organization. I love Pride Rides. And also I think another one that's doing great work for rural queer people is Out in the Open, and they're based down in Brattleboro, and they have these great summits for rural queer folks to get together and be in community. And I think it's really important that all these affinity spaces exist. And thankfully there's a plethora of incredible organizers doing great work in Vermont. The Vermont Relief Collective is another great one, Conscious Homestead. All these organizations are really doing a lot for marginalized communities here.
Great, thank you.
Can I jump in with another organization? Or
Yes.
Well, so Outdoor Gear Exchange in Burlington, I don't know what his title is, but they have a DEI coordinator. His name's Miguel. He's awesome. He's an alumni of UVM POCO, which stands for People of Color Outdoors. And we love doing little like trips and things with them. We love POCO. But anyway, he is their DEI coordinator, and it's really awesome. And he reached out to Fire. And so he's a friend of Fire. But Outdoor Gear Exchange actually has a bunch of cool events. They recently brought some folks from the Full Circle Everest team, and it was the first all-Black team to climb Everest, and they came to Burlington and did a really cool talk. So there's always stuff going on there. I know they did like intro mountain biking for people of color last summer. And yeah, I guess they're not a nonprofit organization, but they're still doing cool things.
Great. Thanks, Elise. Another question from the chat was, my mother-in-law had a stroke and had mobility issues. We tried to get Vermont adaptive ski and sports to help us to get her into a sailboat, but we're unable to get any help. The panelists seem young. What about older people who want to get out in nature but need assistance? And I believe David Weiselman answered this in the chat, but I'm not sure if others could see that. David, if you'd like, feel free to unmute and read, share what you wrote. If not, does anyone else have any sort of ideas for this question about sort of improving access for older people in nature?
So the review, ask me the question one more time, sorry.
So
I answered a few questions in the chat, sorry about that.
Okay, right, no, I appreciate that. So this person was speaking about their mother-in-law who had mobility issues, and they were wondering sort of how we can help older people like her get the assistance they need to get out in nature.
Yeah, I think Jamie actually works with the Northeast Disabled Athletic Association. No, she does. They'd have a sailing program. I just looked at the website when I was actually injured in Colchester at Fletcher Allen. There's a subsegment of that hospital called Fanny Allen. They had an adaptive program where actually I went kayaking and sailing with right there in Mallett's Bay. So there's definitely some resources there. I think Jamie would be better at that in that part of the area. As far as for me, I'm paralyzed from the chest down. I've had friends and family picking me up in and out of kayaks and sailboats for years, but Jamie might be a better person to ask for that one.
Yeah, so I haven't gone sailing in their program yet, but Nate Basso, he sails all the time with them, and he doesn't have any arms. He has prosthetic arms and can't move his body. So, I mean, if he can go sailing, anybody can. It's just a matter of contacting the Northeast Disabled Athletic Association, and they'll get her in anytime. As far as kayaking goes, contacting Kathy Webster, she's gotten people like me into kayaks with a Hoyer lift, but it could just be Hoyer lifts or just help getting into the kayak. Most of getting into the kayaks we do on dry land, so you don't have to worry about getting wet, which is nice. So you can transfer into the kayak on dry land, and then it's wheeled into the water. So yeah, anybody can contact the our program and set up a time to get evaluated and get out in the water.
Great, thanks, Jamie.
And I just dropped a link for the host and panelists, but maybe it can be shared with the attendees. It's the Stuck in Vermont that Ava Solberger did for Jamie, and it features Kathy and kind of can show visibly what Jamie was just explaining. But shameless plug as a super fan of Jamie's.
We actually have another question for Jamie. An audience member said, in Burlington, we received a Vermont Outdoor Recreation Grant to help make the outdoors a more inclusive space in Burlington. We will have a trailer with bicycles, a trailer with outdoor equipment, and camping equipment. With the focus on those areas, what equipment would you recommend we purchase to ensure we support those that need mobility support? For others, when we program, what should we consider? And thank you for your ideas.
I'm not sure. Contacting the people at Northeast Disabled Athletic Association, there are a lot of people with a wide variety of disabilities. Every area is different. I mean, we even have some people who are blind, which opens up a whole nother area of accessibility. So contacting them at our website would be the best way to go, and somebody at the website can will know who can answer those questions.
Thank you. We still have 2 more questions if you guys are willing to answer them. For Justin, is there elected office in your future? Both from Larry Kupferman?
Yeah, I mean, I am an elected official. I'm a justice of the peace here in Cambridge. But I think, after a couple failed attempts for elected office, both on the, for being a state rep and then also for the select board, I found that my power actually lies in more behind the scenes activism. And I instead just work behind some really powerful people. And I proudly was helpful in getting our district at the state level to switch from Republican for many, many decades to Democrat, and we elected a 23-year-old woman and it stayed that way so far the last few bienniums. So not for me, besides my little role as JP, but I obviously am very active in that world still, my day-to-day life, but I love to just make the changes like that behind the scenes and meddle with it as I can.
You did pave the way. A 23-year-old got elected, and
right. And then we got another 23-year-old this last November. So maybe you're onto something, Elon.
And then Thomas, do you want to ask the last question?
Sure. This is just a short question for Abby. Where is your program located? I assume the commenter is speaking about unlikely writers.
Yeah, of course. So our programs are located throughout Vermont, and we're working on expanding into rural New Hampshire.
Great, thank you. We have about 10 minutes left. I suppose, here's another question.
Yeah.
Are the panelists, are there organizations that help those with chronic illness, not physical disability, access the outdoors? Does anyone have any ideas?
I feel like that would depend on what the chronic illness is. For some, like for instance, I have psoriasis, and I don't really know how I would enable folks to. But I think maybe it would depend perhaps on the condition that folks are suffering from. So for instance, like something with psoriasis, where it can be often difficult to like rest on things, like with your arms against things, if you have lesions on your elbows, that's going to present some pretty different needs than, let's say, someone who is suffering with mental illness, because that's also a chronic illness. So I guess that's my first stab at that.
Great. Yeah, it's great that we have a physical therapist to provide some wisdom there.
There's one more question for you guys. Sorry. So this is from Corey Miller. They said, I'm part of a committee managing a new town-owned parcel that has some potential for an accessible trail in central Vermont to a nice view. How might you suggest we learn more about what that would take and if it would become a reality?
I don't think anybody on the Northeast Disabled Athletic Association has really gotten into accessibility as far as trails go. But it might be an area that we should start looking into.
Thank you. Thomas, sorry, I cut you off before. Did you?
No, that's okay. I guess if there are no other questions, I'd just like to open it up. Here's another question that I think might be a good way to close. So how can someone respectfully show that they know they're privileged? So we sort of talked about advice for members of underserved communities. How can they start to feel comfortable? This is sort of asking for the person who belongs to sort of majority demographic groups. What can they do to sort of do the education they need to level the playing field in terms of equitable access to nature?
I'd like to venture an answer if that's okay. I think to do respectfully would really just be like, I acknowledge that I benefit from XYZ privilege. And, it takes, you have to basically, do whatever work that you need to do, whether it's reading a book on anti-racism or social justice or whatever, to realize what kind of privileges that you might be benefiting from. But I think to say that I recognize that I benefit from this privilege is an extremely respectful way of saying it. I don't think someone's going to be like, oh, you think you're better than like that. No, it's actually like, as a person that is in many different marginalized groups, I would be like, okay, thank you for acknowledging that, like, you get to have some things that I don't have, and for me it would feel good. So that would be how I would say it.
I also think people in more dominant identities have a lot more power over a lot of spaces, either like politically or culturally. So just maybe acknowledging that you have a voice and you have to let other people use their voices. So uplift people in like vulnerable communities, or just try not to dominate spaces of conversation, is what I'm going to say.
Does anyone else have any? Elise?
I was going to add something. Yeah, I think part of it too is sometimes I like if someone doesn't say that or like show any sort of recognition of that in themselves, I make the assumption that they're not aware of it, or I like jump to conclusions of like, yeah, they've never had to think of this, or they like don't want me in this space. So like if someone said that to me, or like I have friends who I appreciate when they do recognize that in themselves, because it I would never like personally criticize someone for I guess acknowledging that like unprovoked.
Okay.
I just have I was busy searching for an answer to Corey's question about other organizations for developing accessible trails. When we explored it for grant writing purposes, we used Crutched Mountain Foundation in Southern New Hampshire. They have a bunch of accessible trails, and I dropped the link that hopefully David can share with the attendees to their website. And occasionally they have workshops where they can that they share resources and tools for accessible trail mapping and making. So that was going to be our go-to when we started that exploration, and will be for phase 2.
Also, thank you for David for sharing such lovely resources. It was a big help. Does anyone have any more comments they want to just put out there? No? Okay, cool. We would like to thank both the audience and the panelists for coming to the webinar today. We hope that this conversation has been effective in furthering discussion around inequity of access to nature, and we strongly encourage you guys to keep thinking about this topic and ways to rectify it in the future. I just wanted to put out that we will shortly be posting the recording of this webinar on the Audubon Vermont website, along with a list of resources to learn more about this issue and instructions in their organizations of the time and expertise that instructions on how to make a contribution to the panelists and their organization in recognition of the time and expertise that they contribute tonight. So thank you guys so much, and thanks for everyone for tuning in. Have a nice night.